On today's Daz Studio tutorial, I'm going to do the next video in my Basics series, and in this one we're going to look at some of the finer points of posing controls. So if you haven't seen my other Basics videos, go ahead and check those out now. I will link to my playlist above if you want to check those out. And before I did a little bit on using preset poses, which is generally how I tend to do things. Like I usually don't really get too in depth with posing, but sometimes there's a particular pose that I want to do that I don't know quite how to achieve, or I've got to make a lot of alterations to an existing pose. So what I'm going to cover in this video is just basically how to do that, how to come up with your own poses and some of the finer points. So don't forget to hit the like button and also leave me a comment and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss one of my new videos. And I've also linked to all of the assets that I use in my video below, so be sure to check the video description. If you use one of my affiliate links, then I get a small commission off of that, so that is a great way to support my channel. Also, you can make a monthly pledge through patreon.com. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into this real quick. So right now, I've already got a scene pretty well set up. I've got my figure here. She is already dressed, textures applied, and all of that good stuff. So if I select my figure by clicking her over here on the right under my parameters tab, you're basically going to see everything that you can alter on this character. So what you see might differ a little bit from what I have, depending upon the figure you're using, as well as what third-party plugins you have installed. But you should at least have like general and actor, maybe display, hidden, morphs, and pose controls. Like those are the main ones that we're going to be using. So right now, since we have our figure selected, we can basically control anything about her from using these controls over here, either the general, actor, or pose controls. So if I go under the general heading, that is going to be like mainly the big stuff, such as positioning her in the scene. So I can use my translate controls. X translate translates her, moves her along the x-axis. Y translate is on the y-axis, which is up and down, and then Z moves her along the z-axis, which is forward and backward. If you ever want to reset those, you can just click on the number and just hit 0 and enter. And that will, oops, I forgot I already moved her in this scene because this is not the 0 point. There we go, let me undo that. But at any rate, though, if you wanted her back at the origin, then you could just 0 out like that. Under that, we have the rotate controls, which again, those just rotate your figure along the different axes. And again, if you want to reset that, just put in 0 values. This one should work. There we go, back at the 0 values, and she was rotated. There we go. So if you wanted to rotate her like the opposite direction, again, just put in 180 degrees, 180, and that will face her the opposite direction. All right, you also, under that, you have scale, which just changes the size of the figure, so you can make it larger or smaller, however you want. And again, on this one, we're not going to 0 it out because that would make her nothing, but we're going to put in 100, so that'll be 100% size. That'll be her back to her normal size. If you were to put in 50, that would be 50%, or half size. 200 would be double size. That way. All right, we're going to go back to 100. There we go. Those are all of the general controls that we're going to deal with for right now. I may cover some of the other ones in a future video. All right, under that we have actor, and here you can select each one of her basically body parts, as well as some different plugins. If you have different things, different plugins installed, you might get a little bit more control. But for instance, you can go to, let me go to arms, and so you can change like the length of her arm. So this is just a way that you can customize your character, which I covered some of these on a previous video, so be sure to check that one out. That's in my basic series on customizing your characters and using morphs. So again, I won't go too deep into that for right now. What I am going to do is look at pose controls. And so here we can control the individual parts of our character's body. And basically anything that has a joint, you can move it. So you can move, forearm. That will, this is forearm bend, so that'll move at the elbow. And you can either select that, there are a couple of different ways. You can select that by just clicking on it in the scene, which is what I prefer to do. That way you just click an individual part of the body and you can see it change over here in the parameters tab. Actually, let me make that a little bit wider so you can see. There we go. So you can see Genesis 8 female, left thigh bend. And then if I select her lower leg, that'll be left shin. And so that'll bend at the knee. This one will bend at the hip if I alter that, and so on. And again, I'll get more into those in a moment, but right now you just have to know how to select them in the scene. You can also go over here to pose control and select arms, feet, and these give you different kinds of control over them as well, which again we might get into in a moment. You can also select it in the scene hierarchy. If you are on the parameters tab, go up here, select your figure, and then under that you'll see all of her child objects, which she has eyelashes, that's her hair, jeans, shirt, and then the shirt that's tied around her waist. Those are all of my child objects right now. And up at the very top, you'll see hip, which is the center of the body. And from there, you can see all of the hip children objects. So you have pelvis and lower abdomen. And if you keep on going down, you can eventually find every single part of the body that you would ever want to change. But again, it is really tricky, at least for me, to find them in the hierarchy view. I do use that sometimes if I know exactly what I'm looking for. Or if I'm doing specific objects, like if I want to select the jeans, the shirt, hair, the whatever, I might do it that way. But for me, it is far easier usually just to select that in the scene, just by clicking it, or you can right click and select. But again, if you want to do it that way, that option is there. Alright, so the pose that I'm going to do in this scene is I'm going to have her sitting on the couch with her hands behind her head, and with her feet up on the table. So I already know from doing my test scene earlier that these flowers are going to be in the way and this throw blanket is going to be in the way. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on that and hit the delete key, and that one and the delete key. And that's all I'm going to do to that right now. So everything else on that couch is one object. So I was going to move the pillows out of the way to make it a little bit easier to pose, but these pillows are actually part of the sofa, so I'm unable to move those. If I move it, the whole thing has got to move all together, and I'm unable to move those individually. Alright, so another thing worth mentioning is the clothing selection. I originally had her in a dress, but dresses can be really tricky when you're doing sitting poses. It's a little bit easier if it's a D-force dress, but just for the ease of illustration, I went ahead and made her, gave her some clothing that is a little bit easier to work with. Also, if you have something long like pants or a dress, it's tricky to select her body parts sometimes because it will try to select whatever the topmost object is. So if I was trying to select her thigh, for instance, her thigh bend, then it would try to select the dress, and I would probably have to go up into scene hierarchy and select it that way. So a lot of times I'll have a figure wear jeans or shorts rather, and a small shirt when I'm doing the posing. Then once I get them posed, then I'll put on, if I want them to have on a dress or a robe or anything like that, just so it's easier to deal with. All right, so I generally like to do my poses from the bottom up, so I'm going to go ahead and get her legs generally where I want them. Then I'm going to pose her on the sofa, then I'm going to fine-tune the legs, and then do her arms and her hands behind the head. So the first thing I'm going to do is select the left thigh bend. And then over here, our transform controls are different now. So instead of doing an X, Y, Z axis, we still kind of have that, but instead we're going to bend side to side and twist. So if I bend, it's going to bend her leg forward or backward. And it only lets me move it within a relatively natural range of motion. I did a video earlier on called Posing Without Limits that shows you how to turn limits off in order to do poses. So check that out if you want to use a more unnatural position, or sometimes you just want a little bit, of extra rotation on some of the poses. So that is bend. If I do side to side, basically what it sounds like, I'm just going to do her legs side to side. And of course there is no collision. So they will just go right through each other if you let them. And then twist, again, what it says, like I was going to rotate her hip socket there, twist her leg back and forth. And again, if you want to put these back at their original settings, you can just hit 0 for all of the settings, and that'll put her back in this kind of a semi-T pose. All right, so like I said, I'm going to go ahead and get our legs in place. So I'm going to have her legs bent up this way. So I'm going to select the thigh bend, bend her legs up. Now I'm going to select the entire figure, and you can either move her by using these arrow handles. You can select them up here at the top of the screen and move those back and forth. You can also select the rotation tool to rotate her that way. Or, of course, you can use the parameters tab. But if you do that, be sure you have the parent figure selected, the Genesis 8 female. Then you can move her along those axes. Something else that's worth mentioning is that the axes over here on the right panel of the screen, the parameters panel, these follow a global axis system. So these are set. It will always move her from the perspective, like if I click on my box up here and go to front view. Actually, this is back view, sorry. Let me go to front view. There we go. So these axes are always going to be this direction. X is left to right, Y is up and down, and Z is backward and forward. So the controls here, on the other hand, these are specific to the character. So you see, if I rotate her along the y-axis, those axes rotate with her. So now my z-axis is going to move her at a diagonal. It's going to move her forward and backward from her perspective. But if I do it over here, it's still going to move her forward and backward from the scene's perspective. So keep that in mind as you're moving. That might get you some weird behavior every once in a while. All right, so let's go ahead and zero out her rotation. There we go. And I'm going to turn her 180 on the y-axis. There we go. All right, now we're going to get her about where we want her to be on the couch. So let's move her into position. I'm just going to use these axes because that's a little bit easier for me currently. And again, yeah, there's no collision detection, so she's just going to melt right into everything. So let's get her about where we want her. Let's get her legs and her lower half about even with the couch. There we go. I'm not going to worry about her arms right now because we're going to move those anyway. All right, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put her right leg crossing over her left leg. So I'm going to go ahead and get her legs, her left leg where I want it first. I'm going to put it down on the table by bending it down. And if you need some fine tuning controls, you can just use these plus and minus buttons, and that just moves in little incremental values. I was going to move that up till it just barely clears the table there, so it looks like it's resting on top and not melting into it. All right, and then I'm going to do her right leg, so I'm going to bend that up a little bit, move it side to side. There we go. I'm going to bend that up some more. Actually, let's do this. I'm going to bend her shin down, rotate her thigh, twist that a little bit. Oops. And then let's go side to side. There we go. That's kind of what I'm looking for. There we go. I'm just having her right leg rest on her left one there. It's pretty good so far. All right. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bend her back a little bit. She is sitting up very straight right now, and that looks a little bit awkward and uncomfortable. So I'm going to go down here and select her lower abdomen. Let's bend that back a little bit. There we go. And now I'm going to worry about her arms. So I'm going to start with her left shoulder bend, which is her upper arm. And so on this one, we can go front back. We can bend it up and down. And we can also twist it. We can rotate it there. So I'm going to start by bending it up a little bit. And I know that her forearm is going to be bent behind her, so I'm going to select the left forearm bend. Let's go ahead and bend that about where I think it's going to be. All right, then we're going to go back to our left shoulder bend, twist that. There we go. Now it's starting to take shape. And let's bend that up a little bit more behind her head. There we go. Bend that just a little bit more. There we go. So now her hand is literally inside her head. So let's go back a little bit with her forearm, or shoulder bend rather. And then let's twist that a little bit more. There we go. So the placement on this doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not planning on having the camera behind her. So I usually follow the general rule of out of sight, out of mind. If you can't see it, it doesn't exist. So as long as her hands look like they're perfect from the front perspective, then they're perfect. You don't, if I were doing this normally, I would take the extra time, or if I was doing a camera behind her, I would take the extra time to interlock her fingers, make sure everything looks perfectly natural on the back of her head. But for now, I'm not planning on it, so we don't really have to worry about that. All right, let's go ahead and do the same thing with her right arm. All right. There we go. Bend that up, and then bend her forearm in. And let's go ahead and twist that. And then bend that into place. All right, we're going to bend her arm down a little bit more. And again, it's inside her head, so let's fix that. I'm going to see if I can do it by twisting. That's pretty much it. Here we go. All right, and so I'm not going to do a render on this one, so I'm just going to pretend that my perspective view is my camera view. I kind of like doing this sort of a 3/4 shot. It's a little bit more interesting than just doing a dead-on shot. So let's do that. I'm going to have her turn her head in. So I'm going to select her head. So we'll do this so that she's looking at the camera. And I'm going to twist. One of the trickiest part about doing like a dead-on view pose like this is getting her to look like she's looking at the camera. So I actually usually tweak this a whole lot. There we go. And try to get the eye placement just right as well. There we go. And this figure actually has a pretty decent zeroed out facial expression. Normally they have like this weird dead-eyed blank stare. Hers isn't too bad, but we're still going to go ahead and alter that a little bit. So if I select her head and then go to pose controls, actually I'll show you this first. If we select her whole body and go to pose controls, we get everything that we could possibly want to control. So you can like go to head, go to mouth, like do all of that. But if you just select a specific body part, it will only show you the children of that body part. So if I select her head, we have head and neck. So you can twist side to side or bend her neck. Then we can go under head, and we get brow, cheeks and jaw, expressions, like all of these different things that we can do. And I'm going to give her kind of a smirk or a side smile. So let's go to mouth, smile, simple. And if I do this, if I bring that slider up, you can see her do kind of a closed-lipped smile. And also you can see the sliders under that. The mouth, smile, simple left and simple right are both going up. And if I bring it all the way down, it turns into more of a frown. All right, so we're going to put that back in the middle. And like I said, we're going to do kind of a crooked smile or a smirk. So I'm just going to bring this mouth, smile, simple left up a bit. There we go. And I'm going to bring this smile slider up just a touch as well. There we go. Let's do a mouth side to side. There we go. Just a little bit. Very, very subtle. And I was going to do a mouth open. We'll go ahead and leave that closed. I think that's probably close enough. There we go. So that, as it sits, is not perfect, but pretty close. I could do a little bit more tweaking with that, probably. Actually, let's go ahead and do that. So if we look around here, you can see that her hands are just blending into each other. But of course, if you can't see it from the camera perspective, it doesn't really matter that much. But I'm going to bend her arm up a little bit, though. There we go, and bend her forearm up a little. And I'm going to bring this one down just a touch. There we go. I think that looks pretty good. Yeah. There we go. And then from there, if you wanted to, you could save this as a preset. If you want to use this pose later, just go up to File, hover over Save As, and go to Pose Preset. There you go. And then from there, you can save it however you like. Just name it, save it in a folder where you'll remember where it is. And this is actually a good way to monetize Daz3d as well. That doesn't take a whole lot of artistic skills. If you can come up with a grouping of poses that are similar to one another that fit into a certain category, like for instance, like sitting poses. And if you can do some that you think are professional quality, do a whole group of them. You can sell them on a marketplace such as the Daz Marketplace or Renderosity or any other place that deals in Daz3d assets, and people can buy your poses. Alright, that will about do it for this video. So again, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and check out my affiliate links below if you want to support my channel, as well as my Patreon page at patreon.com/SteveDave83, where you can support me for as little as $1 a month. Trust me, every little bit helps. And if you're unable to support me monetarily, no problem. All of my content is free. Just donate if you want to. And if you're unable to donate, just keep watching my videos. I'm actually really, really close to being able to apply for monetization through the YouTube Partner Program. I should be able to hit that mark this week. I just need a little bit more viewership hours. And so thank you very, very much for continuing to watch my videos and for helping me out with that. And take care. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.